we've embarked on major moves to build a more inclusive society and mitigate inequalities. It's not a recent shift. It's not a sudden shift. We started in a major way in 2007, and since then, step by step, year by year, we've made enhancements in education, in housing, in healthcare, and in retirement. A deliberate tilt to support our lower and middle income groups, step by step. And if you look at each of our budgets, if you look at the philosophies articulated in our National Day rally speeches by the Prime Minister, this is a shift that we've been working at progressively, year by year, over the last 7 to 8 years. What it boils down to is that we are providing more active support for Singaporeans at each stage of life. When you're young, when you're in your working years, as you raise your family, and when we all retire and get older. And very importantly, we are building a social compact that is not only about stronger collective responsibility, but which seeks to encourage personal and family responsibility. And I'll come back to this later, but that's at the heart of it. We're building a social compact that's not just about stronger collective responsibility, but seeks to encourage personal and family responsibility. Let me describe the major steps we are taking and how they add up to this new social compact. First, we are intervening earlier in life, investing more in our young so as to preserve and encourage social mobility, because that has to be part of our Singapore identity, social mobility. It's a challenge all over the world. In fact, social mobility is the defining challenge in every advanced country today. The slowdown and the low levels of social mobility, almost irrespective of which country you look at, including the Scandinavians. We are fortunate that Singapore has so far done relatively well. It is actually still a more fluid society than most. And I'm going to show you a slide. It's a slide that requires a bit of explanation, so I'll go through it a little slowly, but it's extremely important. Now, first, don't look at the slide yet. What this slide shows is if we look at people who start off with low-income family backgrounds, parents are low income. We take the bottom 20% of parents. We look at what happened to the children once they finish education, entered work, and are well into their working lives. Where did they end up? If everything was equal, in other words, if we all had equal abilities and if backgrounds and everything associated with our backgrounds played no role in what happens in life, then the chance of you ending up in the bottom 20, the next 20, the middle 20, or the top 20 will be equal. We'll be all distributed 20% in each quintile of society, if everything was equal. But everything is not equal. There is the lottery of birth. And in every society, your background is associated not just with your abilities, but a culture around your background, in every society. And what has been seen in most advanced societies, for reasons that are not fully understood, is that in the last 20 years especially, people who are better off are not just giving more resources to their kids, but they're just putting a lot more time and effort into their kids for reasons that are not fully understood. Everyone else in society is trying to do the best for their kids, as they have always done, but for some reason, those at the top are just putting even more effort into helping their kids succeed, starting very early and through life. That's society, and those are the natural workings of society. So we can't help those natural workings of society. It's true everywhere in the world. But we want to give the best chance for someone who starts off with a low-income background or middle-income background to move up. Make sure it remains a fluid society. Now look at the data. If you look at the US, basically what this shows is that for those who start off within the bottom 20, only 7.5% of them, that's about 1 in 15, 1 in 14, 1 in 14 make it into the top 20%. If everything was equal, 20% of them would be in the top 20%. But in fact, only 7.5% make it in the top 20%. And this is now widely acknowledged in the US. They used to think of themselves as a place with considerably more mobility than Europe. Actually, it has not been the case for decades. The UK is not very different. Very little mobility. Poverty today is poverty tomorrow. It's entrenched. The Scandinavian economies are somewhat better, so about 10% to 12% of those who start off in the lower income group end up in the top quintile, the top 20%. And Canada is doing much better than the United States, side by side, but they've got a different system, less entrenched social barriers, and they're doing somewhat better. Singapore, for those who start off in the bottom 20%, 14% end up in the top 20%. And this is a relatively young group that I'm showing, those in their mid-20s to early 30s. If I were to show you the older generation, we know the story. It's even more fluid, even more fluid. But even for this younger group, mid-20s to early 30s, 14% end up in the top 20%. So very fluid society. But we know it will get more difficult. With each decade, it gets more difficult as society gets more settled. And the problems faced in the advanced societies we will not evade the problems faced in the advanced societies. The natural workings of society exist. So we have to work harder at it. And that means especially, as Mr. Lim Wee Kiat just emphasized, it means starting earlier, finding every way to help every kid who has a weak start to gain confidence and to get a strong start. We're investing very heavily in preschool education for this reason, and we're doing a lot in our primary school years. Preschool education is well known, but primary school years, let me remind members that when you add up what we are doing, for students who have a weak start in primary school, we are now spending 2.5 times more in real terms compared to just 5 years ago. 2.5 times more in real terms compared to 5 years ago. That's teachers, it's allied educators, it's programs to help them develop stronger numeracy and literacy skills, starting in primary 1 and 2 and working their way up. Very significant initiative. So we have to intervene earlier, intervene more strongly, but find the best and most creative ways to help people gain confidence and overcome early deficits. We're also doing more for special students, special needs students. Our spending on students in our SPED schools has increased, again over the last 5 years, by 50%. It was already much higher than for a student in a normal school, in a regular school. And we've increased it further by 50% in real terms, strengthening the SPED curriculum, helping to train up the teachers. MOE is funding professional development of the teachers in our SPED schools. That too is important. So, intervening earlier and trying to intervene better. Secondly, we've enhanced affordability across the system, from preschool all the way up to the tertiary level. We know about the kindergarten and childcare subsidies. For low-income family, you pay as little as $3 a month for childcare and $1 a month for kindergarten. But across the system, we've also enhanced subsidies for the middle-income group. I spoke about this in the budget, and especially in tertiary education, a significant shift that we began a few years ago was to enhance bursaries and other forms of support for the middle-income group in tertiary education. Thirdly, it's about the pathways. By creating more diverse pathways to cater to every talent and inclination, and even different learning styles, we're also trying to promote social mobility. Because people have different strengths, different interests, and by providing more diverse pathways, we maximize our chances of social mobility. And that has been true in the school system, but especially true at the tertiary level. And the strengthening of the applied pathway is a critical route to social mobility. So that's education. major set of initiatives. Second major initiative we've taken is to promote home ownership, particularly by helping the lower and middle income groups. And I'm not going to go into details because members know the details. Of course, prices are not like what they were 40 or 50 years ago. And that's exactly why the older generation today is sitting on substantial assets, housing assets, substantial housing equity in their homes, because prices are not like what they were even 30 years ago. But what's critical is to help young couples today, once they're ready to set up a family, help young couples to own a home. And on that, we've spared no efforts. First, in trying to tame the cycle, which we are achieving, by boosting supply of HDB flats through our additional buyer stamp duties and seller stamp duties, all the measures we've taken to try to tame the cycle. It's working, and it's working better than in Hong Kong or some other places. But very importantly, it's also about the enhancement of housing grants, the HDB grants, the BTO grants. What we are able to achieve for a young couple in Singapore today is unmatched by any other leading city in Asia. We know about Hong Kong, of course, extremely high housing prices. Likewise, Shanghai and Beijing, Tokyo, Seoul, Taipei, even Sydney and Melbourne. If you look at the income of a young couple, the average young couple, compared to the price of a home that they want to move into, we're not doing badly in Singapore at all. Homes are more within reach of our young than they are in any other leading Asian city. That's home ownership. Thirdly, what we're doing in working age. And I'm sorry I'm spelling this out in a little bit of detail, but it's worth reminding ourselves as to how our social programs add up and how we've been making deliberate moves over the last 7 to 8 years. What we're doing in working age. Skills Future is a major investment, and I've spoken about it. And at its heart, it's not an economic program. At its heart, it's about helping every individual push their potential through life. Not just what you do in school, but keep pushing, discovering and pushing your potential. Everyone has a strength, although we may not figure it out during our school years. Everyone has a strength, and it's never too late in life to identify your strengths, identify your interests, and push your potential. It's never too late to learn. Skills Future is itself a major force for social mobility. It's not just an economic strategy. Fourthly, we've also taken significant moves to temper inequality. Workfare was a major step. Started in 2006 with a temporary scheme, made it permanent in 2007, and we enhanced it in 2010 and 2013, and we'll continue to review it in future, so that even as wages go up over time, we will still want to use workfare to redistribute and temper inequalities. Workfare is not about alleviating absolute poverty. It's about mitigating inequality even as incomes rise. We have to mitigate inequality. And for the lowest paid workers, the progressive wage model is now working its way through first the cleaning industry. We are moving on to the security industry next. And we focused on industries where outsourcing is prevalent and which are prone to cheap sourcing as a result of outsourcing practices. That's what we focused on. We've also introduced a permanent GST voucher scheme. Again, it's a redistributive device, a permanent GST voucher scheme to help lower income households. So that's the fourth initiative, tempering the disparities in life. Fifth, we're giving greater assurance in old age so that our elderly can make the most of life. First, at work, we introduced a special employment credit, quite a unique scheme by international standards, to help our older workers keep their jobs or find new jobs and stay employed, continue to contribute and take pride in contributing, which is what Singaporeans want to do. But beyond work, we've made very significant shifts in healthcare. First, by enhancing subsidies, not just for the low-income group, but the middle-income group. Last year, through the Pioneer Generation package, This year, through MediShield Life, which will be heavily subsidized again for the lower and middle income group, and by the significant expansion of capacity, which you're familiar with, all around the island, primary care, acute care, step-down care, very significant expansion of capacity. And next, we'll be rolling out the Silver Support Scheme to provide a further supplement, a supplement to personal savings and family support. And Silver Support, like workfare, will be a way of tempering inequalities through life. Finally, we are doing more to encourage the community to take responsibility and to step in. In 2011, in Budget 2011, we had a major initiative, the Community Silver Trust Scheme. We put aside $1 billion for dollar matching for voluntary contributions to VWOs, providing for either long-term care or helping the disabled. Major scheme. And I should add, in relation to Mr. Teo Hopin's question, that the Community Silver Trust, in fact, provides matching grants for the NKF and for kidney dialysis. And more recently, we've launched the Care and Share SG50 movement. It was rolled out in 2013, and we've extended it. Again, dollar-for-dollar matching for grants raised by, for a whole range, for a very broad spectrum of social service sector VWOs. We've enhanced our tax incentives for donations, which is well known, and Mr. Seah Kian Peng spoke about this. We introduced the 250% tax deduction in 2009, and it's had good results, which is why we've extended it for another 3 years, quite apart from this year having a 300% deduction. Mr. Seah, in fact, asked about the revenue implications of this tax deduction. This tax deduction, the 250% tax deduction, has meant a tax loss to the government of about $120 million per year, $120 million per year from 2010 to 2014. But it led to a gain for the charitable sector of about $870 million a year. So the government lost $120 million, but it led to a gain for the charity sector of about $870 million per year. So if you take it all together, this has been a set of major moves at every stage of life, strengthening our policies, providing greater assurance and opportunities in education, at work, in healthcare, in retirement. And let me show how it all adds up in our system. When you take all the taxes that people pay and all the benefits that they receive through our different schemes, how does it add up? It's basically a progressive system, and one that's been made more progressive, where the higher income households contribute the bulk of the taxes and the lower income households receive the bulk of the benefits. But it's also one where the middle income receives more benefits than it used to. And let me just show that very briefly with a slide. So if you take the top 20% of households, they pay 55% of all taxes. When you add up income tax, property tax, GST, car taxes, maid levies, everything. They pay 55% of all taxes, and they receive 12% of the benefits. If you look at next to the middle 20% of households, they pay 11% of all taxes, and they receive 20% of all benefits. When I say middle 20%, I mean those between the 40th and 60th percentile. They pay 11% of all taxes, and they receive 20% of all benefits. And the lowest 20% of households pays 9% of all taxes, largely through the GST. They pay, everyone contributes, and the low income group contributes through the GST and a few indirect taxes, but mainly the GST. So they pay 9% of all taxes, but they receive 27% of all benefits. It's a progressive system. And I should add that we have also shifted significantly in the weight being placed on structural transfers, permanent schemes, as distinct from temporary schemes that we're able to afford when the budget is in good shape. 90% of our transfers last year comprised permanent schemes. The system is not just about redistributing from the rich to the poor. It's also about the middle income group, very importantly. The middle income group in Singapore are net beneficiaries of our system. And there's been a very significant increase in the amount of benefits the middle income group have got over the last 10 years. For every dollar of tax paid by the middle income group, they now get $1.70 back. In fact, a bit more than $1.70 back. So for every dollar of tax paid, when you add up all their taxes, income tax, what those who happen to own a car would pay, add all the taxes, property tax and so on, for every dollar of tax they pay, they get 170 back in benefits. And this is real data that refers to the middle 20% in our society, Singaporeans. And it's gone up significantly over the last 10 years. And it's a fair system. The benefits that our middle income group get are not like what you see in the Scandinavian countries or the UK or many other advanced countries. Some of them have free healthcare, free tertiary education, free many things. But they're paying for it. It's not free. It is never free. And in most of these societies, with the Scandinavian countries being a classic example, in fact, their tax systems are not particularly progressive. They rely mainly on the VAT and high income tax for everyone to be able to flow back the benefits. Everyone is paying for the free benefits that they're getting. And when you add it all up, the benefits they get for the dollar of tax they pay in the middle income group is in fact less than ours. I'll show you another chart which compares us to some other countries. So the US is the lowest tax country amongst the advanced countries generally. The income taxes for the person in the middle, it's about 17% effective tax rate, relatively low compared to many other advanced countries. In Singapore, it's close to zero for those in the middle. In the US, it's about 17%, lower than the UK and the Scandinavian countries. And the US, when you look at their sales tax, they don't have a national GST, but they've got sales taxes at the local level, which are about 4 to 11%. The US has somewhat lower taxes than most. And in the US, you get about $1.30 back for every dollar of tax you pay. Finland is about $1.30 as well. UK slightly more. And in Singapore, it's about $1.70. So we are a low tax regime. We try to keep the burden of taxes on the middle income group especially low. We target our benefits in healthcare and education in every area to support the low income group and the middle income group, but we target it. And in general, everyone co-pays for what we are getting. So we know that nothing is for free. We co-pay, we keep taxes low, and the net benefits are ones which the middle income group gains from. So that's worth highlighting. Now let me go on to explain what this adds up to in terms of our thinking, our values, and our philosophy. We have tilted our system deliberately to help our lower and middle income group. And in the last 5 years, there's been a significant tilt. The government is playing a more active role in redistribution. But the key to building a stronger society is not in how much we are doing to redistribute. It is about how we strengthen the values that undergird and sustain a fair and inclusive society. It's not how much we are doing, but how we do it, and whether what we are doing helps to strengthen the values and the habits that sustain a fair and inclusive society. And at the heart of it all, we are seeking to build a stronger social compact for the future. A compact where personal and collective responsibility go hand in hand. That's at the heart of what we're doing. We're seeking to build a stronger social compact where personal and collective responsibility reinforce each other and go hand in hand. Our approach is quite different from the cradle-to-grave welfarism that was developed over 50 or 60 years in many of the advanced countries. Our approach is about empowering people and aspirations and rewarding responsibility throughout life. That's our approach. It's quite different from cradle-to-grave welfarism. It's about encouraging and empowering people to learn at every age, to work, to take second or third chances, and to make meaningful contributions through our careers, whichever the job. helping people to own a home, and whether as breadwinners or homemakers, to raise the next generation. And helping everyone to make the most of life even in our senior years. It's also about developing a broader culture of responsibility in our society. That's not just about everyone doing their part, rich or poor, but it's also about being able to count on each other. And those two things go together. We are able to count on each other now and in the future only if everyone plays their part, if everyone plays their responsible role. Our whole approach, therefore, has been to avoid a zero-sum game between personal and collective responsibility. Avoid a zero-sum game and get a compact where personal and collective responsibility, in fact, reinforce each other. And we've had a thoughtful debate on this issue. As Ms. Cha Yong said, if we lean too much to the left, we will not have much left. As Mr. Karthikeyan said, if we lean too much to the right too, then we're not doing the right thing. And there's truth in both views. There's truth in both views. Mr. Xi Jinping noted the polarization of views in the United States, the polarization between red and blue views. A very serious problem, because they're looking at problems through red lens or blue lens. And we have to avoid looking at problems through the lenses of the left or the right alone, because there are truths on both the left and the right. And these are the truths that we've learned from 50 years of experience in social policies all over the world, particularly in more mature societies. We cannot solve problems if we leave it entirely to the market or the natural workings of society. It will lead to widening income gaps that reflect not just people's different abilities and efforts, but also the advantages and disadvantages of the backgrounds they start with. And it will sap the morale of our society if we just leave it to the market to sort things out. Neither can we think that social policy interventions alone can create a fair and cohesive society. Without a culture of personal responsibility in the family, in education, at work, and saving for our future, it will not create a fair and inclusive society, and it will sap the vim and energy of our society at every level. So I think we need some humility. Actually, in every society, we need some humility as to what works in social policy. Take truths from both the left and the right, but we must have some humility. Because one of the lessons we've learned from the policy interventions in the more mature societies is that lasting improvements in society are not easy to achieve. And it's certainly not just a matter of putting in more government resources. Our real task is to find ways to help people, not just by providing them with more resources, but helping them to rebuild family lives, making sure we've got empathetic teachers, mentors, community volunteers, and helping them to build circles of friends and peers around them, people with a positive and aspiring outlook on life. So we've made our system more progressive as part of our efforts to build a fair and inclusive society, but we've got to never forget that it rests on this compact of personal and collective responsibility. As Ms. Jessica Tan put it, we must preserve our Singapore ethic of work, effort, and responsibility, and collective responsibility for the community. I think that sums it up.